But today we have Laura Gemininder here with us today. Laura is an award-winning entrepreneur, international coach, federation, certified coach, and national speaker. So she survived a quarter-life crisis, made friends with her fear, set a few goals to help her leave her corporate HR job after 14 years, and set out to make an impact in the world. Her entrepreneurial spirit has led her to start several businesses, including Laura Gemininder Coaching and Consulting. She has been recognized as an In Business magazine 40 Under 40, honored for her business savvy and civic contributions, and a Brava magazine Woman to Watch. Laura strives to live an interesting life, and everything stated was accomplished in the spirit of do one thing every day that scares you, and I love that. So I'm asking if you guys feel comfortable, please turn your cameras on. If you don't, that's totally fine, but it just kind of helps bring that extra interaction with Laura today for today's Ready or Not, the Time Is Now webinar. So Laura, I'm going to hand it off to you to go ahead and get started to make sure that you can have the floor for as much time as needed.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction and for your flexibility and support. For those of you that are here today, potentially you had registered when we were going to do this in April, and I'll share a little bit later in our talk, but I've been having some health challenges, and so Kelsey specifically, but Madison College has been so wonderful to me, and I really appreciate for any of those that did have to wait a month. Hopefully it is worth the wait. And when I have talks like this, I get introduced sometimes, and I'm always kind of sitting there because it's like when I hear it, there's always that kind of moment that's like, whose life is that? Because my life didn't used to be like this at all. In fact, with today's topic, it's Laura Not Ready Gemininder, right? Like Not Ready could have been my middle name when I think back on just where I was before I really showed up, before I started living the life that I was meant to live, whether that's been me in my business, whether it's been me creating events, whether that's been me as a motivational speaker. Like never in a million years did I think I would be here talking to you about the time is now. It's time to go for it. And so I really appreciate that you are all here today, those that can be with us here live. And like Kelsey mentioned, we are recording today. And so there'll be other people that are watching us on replay. And we are really excited for this topic because of what is possible. And we're going to talk about, this is specifically geared towards women, but women aren't the only ones that hesitate, personally or professionally. Women aren't the only ones that maybe hold themselves back or don't dream big enough, right? And so today we're really going to talk about what that looks like. And for me, there was that pivotal moment. I had started about 12 years ago. I had started doing some life coaching and taking some life coaching classes and had a few clients on the side, but I had my corporate gig. And even though it wasn't very fulfilling to me, it didn't feel like I was in the right career, almost like it didn't feel like I was in the right life. And I started getting super involved with the community and ended up being elected president of a large women's organization. And I still remember at the wrap-up party, that after that year of being a president, after sitting on the board for so many years, after giving so much time and energy to something I love so much, I remember one of the women who had been a mentor to me had come up to me at that event, and she's like, congratulations, thank you, kind of those typical things. And then she goes, what are you going to do now? And I tell you could hear a pin drop. And it was like that exact second that it was like, I had planned to coast. Like seriously, like that was one of the hardest, best, most rewarding years of my life. And I was planning to coast. And the truth of it is, I'd been doing coaching on the side for a while. I'd been dreaming of starting this business. I'd been dreaming of doing something else, of getting more freedom and independence and creating, work that I love that also was aligned with the lifestyle that I wanted to live, but it just seemed so hard. It seemed so impossible. It kept being someday, that someday dream, right? And her asking me that question, what's next, really got me to think about that. And so today we are here to think about those kinds of like, what's next? Like, you are ready, and what is that next step? And what does that look like? And why do we hesitate, right? Like, that was like one of the big ahas for me. So before we kind of jump into things, I'm super curious, and we're kind of do a little bit of interacting in the chat. So there'll be time at the end for questions, comments, all of that goodness. And in the meantime, I have my chat box up, and Kelsey will kind of be watching too if there's anything to kind of quick interject, because sometimes I get but I'm curious, like, when you think, like, what prompted you to register? What prompted you to be here today? Like, I'm here today because. I would love it if you would put in the chat box so we can kind of get an idea of where are you with things, right? Like, what is that thing that's there for you? What was that pull, right? Like, we're all have very full lives, and to be here with us, we're so grateful for that. And we're wanting to make sure that we're feeling supported, right? So feel free to put in the comment box what I'm here today because fill in the blank. What is that blank for you? And oh goodness, there we go. Talking a little bit about our reality, right? Like, I can't jump into this to encourage you to go big without really kind of acknowledging where we are in the world. And that looks different for all of us. And we've all just finished what has been probably the hardest year of our lives. And things are starting to shift, things are starting to change. People are being able to get their shots. Maybe they're going back to work. Maybe there's some sort of the new normalcy, right? However, thinking about like, what has the last year really looked like for us as a country, but specifically for women? And some of what has really stayed with me is the fact that like the percent of American women working is the lowest since 1988. That's what COVID has done to us. 2 million have left the workforce in one way or another. I love this picture of this, mom trying to get work done, and that kid that's kind of playing next to her. And that's been the life for so many people. And maybe it's not just the one kid, maybe it's several kids. Maybe it's, my sister had one at home and one at school because of the age difference, right? And what that has really looked like as far as women having to pull back, women having to do more of the childcare, the homeschooling, making arrangements, changing our lives, and what that has really looked like. According to the Washington Post, more than 2 million dropped out of the labor force since October. And what that has really looked like, really, for what that impact has been on women, because it's not only that like women have had to drop out of the workforce, but the work that women do, the industries that are typically more female dominated, have been more impacted by COVID. There's been more job losses in these sectors. So when you really think about those two overwhelming changes that we've had for women, with women losing jobs, with women having to increase childcare because they typically do more, like that's something that was still before COVID. But what does that look like when there's even more of that, trying to have some sort of balance in the home, right? And one of the things I've seen in the last couple of weeks, and it's been a hard time, burnout has been high, there's brain fog, like motivation has been low. And in the last couple of weeks, one of the things I've seen a lot is the word languishing, that we are languishing. And what that really means is it's a sense of stagnation, emptiness, muddling through the day, feeling dulled, our motivation and focus. And that is a hard place to be in. And what all these things really are sharing and highlighting, like some of this stuff isn't new, it's just been magnified. And so that is really startling. That is really something to be thinking about, as far as if we are having our motivation dulled, our focus dulled, like what does that look like to get that back? Right? Like if we're languishing, how do we thrive? How are we finding our meaning and purpose, that like energy in our lives, especially as we're coming out of this and starting to navigate a new for now normal? And because for those that know me, I am like Miss Sunshine. I try to focus on the positive, and my brain is wired to like be very future focused. And tomorrow's always going to be better than today. Thinking about what that looks like with the positive, right? Like COVID has changed us in a lot of positive ways, and so there is the Greater Good Science Center at the University of Berkeley. And I don't know if you are familiar with it or not, but their research, their articles, their programming is top notch on the science of positivity. And so this study was 57 scientists, futurists, where they asked them to fill out all these surveys on how they think COVID is going to be impacting us. And it was positive and negative, but like some of the things I saw and some of the things I'm hearing are that positive. And I think, especially for what we're talking about today, thinking about those habits, reconsidering habits, like COVID really had us reflecting on where we are in our lives and what we want. And maybe those two things aren't the same. And so for a lot of women, either by choice or thinking about all the changes for women in the workplace, like some women are being forced into the entrepreneur life, like starting a business. And some people, that's always been their dream. And so thinking about those new habits, the what's possible, starting to think about the changes that we want to make as we are coming out of this, as things are opening, and to really see what is possible. And thinking about, not only has there been that shift with COVID, but even in the last 10, 20, 30 years, there has really been a shift as well in what our life patterns, what our life paths have looked like for so many of us for such a long time. This is from MIT, the Sloan Management Review. But thinking about, for so many people for so long, it was get an education, go to work, retire. And it was even not atypical 23 years ago for some people to work their entire careers at one company. Back in my corporate world, there were so many. Like one of my coworkers had been there like 25 years when I left 6 years ago, and she's still there in a lot of them. So that's atypical in general. But for a lot of people, that was the path forward. And now what we're seeing, the shift that has been happening, is that it's not a simple linear path forward as it used to be for so many people. There's still an emphasis on education, but whether people will search out and want to, medicine college is such a popular alternative. Like the four-year colleges aren't necessarily growing the way that we have these wonderful community colleges, these tech colleges that are on the forefront, that are offering certification programs, they're offering continuing education, they're offering degree programs. And thinking about that might be education at one point, and that looks different. And that might be combined with more of an exploration, like maybe at 18 you don't know what you want to do, so what does that look like to maybe work a couple years and then returning students, right? Maybe you're 25, maybe you're 30 and just going to tech school or college, and thinking about how that looks like to be an employee, and maybe an employee at one or several companies, changing jobs every 12 to 18 months. Maybe you're transitioning. One of the clients I talked with yesterday, she's in her early 30s and is planning to retire by the time she's 40. but thinking about it looks different for everyone. And for most of us, statistics are showing that at one time in our life or another, if we're continuing to work the next 10, 20, 30 years, self-employment is going to be a piece of that, whether that's a freelancer, whether that's a consultant, whether that's as an entrepreneur owning multiple businesses. But thinking about what that looks like, and then retirement's going to look a lot different too. And so what does that look like as far as that path? If we are at some point going to be self-employed, the statistics are really showing an uptick in women starting businesses and people starting businesses in general. But you would think during COVID, people are pulling back. And that is true. There are a lot of factors and sectors like that graphic I showed a couple slides back, where people are, where there are industries that have been really significantly impacted, and there are a lot of industries that have doubled, triple, they're growing, or we keep hearing about the roaring 20s being on repeat, as far as like people are being more comfortable going out, people are more comfortable spending money again, and like what that's going to look like. Certain industries, like the restaurant industry, has pulled back a lot. And like, for example, what is that going to be looking like going forward? There might have still that takeout model and people coming in. The gentleman down the street added on a huge outdoor porch so that he could take advantage. There was actually a baby shower out there the other day. And so being creative, but knowing that in certain industries, there are great opportunities, and that's even exploding in some industries, that it's going to be coming back and roaring back, as they say. This was a graphic I took a picture of a long time ago at the Madison Dream Bank, and it really stayed with me that when we think about the ready or not, and what does that look like to chase a goal, to dream, to put it together as a plan. And so this really stayed with me because of when we think about ready or not, well, what if we aren't really feeling ready? And like, why is that? And it's totally normal, because we're thinking about doing something we maybe haven't done before. And so thinking about, these are the 4 top reasons, and they did a poll, right? So the thing is to say that and we're going to talk about this too, is like, there is some fact and there is some fiction in this, right? And so how do you get at that? How do you think about, for example, if you are someone that feels like, resources, or maybe I don't have enough time, and we all feel time poor every once in a while, but how do you make time for the things that are most important to you? And so thinking about, what resources do you need? How will you make the time? What support do you need? And we'll talk about a lot of these pieces as we go through it. And how will you grow your confidence? And part of that is in the pursuit, right? Because taking action is one of the ways to build your confidence. But thinking about that, these are some of the things that come up when people start thinking about doing something they haven't done before. And then maybe why there's that dream, and then there isn't the plan or isn't the action. Like, what part of that are we getting stalled out, and why? And knowing these are some of the reasons that people do kind of feel like their dream is too big. This is one of my favorite cartoons. It's the Awkward Yeti. They're on Instagram. They're probably like other places. But I thought that this was a kind of aligned with the idea of like not having enough time. But it's the head and the heart, right? And so our heart wants us to do all the fun, wonderful things and just have happiness and joy. And then our brain is there to try to keep us safe. But it's kind of that joke, like anytime there's anything unpleasant, it's like, oh, let's go scroll through social media, or let's go like have a treat or something like that. But thinking about all the things that we do as like distractions or to hold us back, and thinking about like the time thing, like, I don't know about you, but I'm on social media a lot, and I try to pull back for that. And, even if we gave up a half an hour a day at the end of the year, that's a whole week of time we get back. So If it's important, you'll find the time for it. Another thing that I always think about too, and this is one of those where I always kind of think it's kind of morbid. And in fact, the Latin, they have a phrase, memento mori. Hopefully I said that right. And that means remember you will die. And it's hard to think about not being here. And it's even harder to think at the end of our life, like, what are the regrets that we're going to have? And there was a woman by the name of Bonnie Ware who did end of life care. And she kept hearing the same regrets. She kept hearing the same concerns that where people wanted, more time, or they would have done things differently. And so she wrote a book about that. And the reason that I bring it up is, like, when I do think about those big things that I want, someday, my someday goals, we don't know that we're going to have that someday. And so I'm just like getting goosebumps right now, even thinking about it. Like, we're here today and we might not be here tomorrow. And I had a really hard reminder of that at the beginning of last year, right before COVID started. I had my mentor and dear friend pass in a helicopter accident with her daughter in Hawaii. And I still think about that and thinking about it could be all over and living my life as a gift. And what is the legacy I want to really to leave behind, and really focusing on, like, what is your why and how are you living that? And thinking about that we have the time, and those what ifs do come up. Those what ifs do come up for us to think, like, what if I start a job on the side and my employer finds out and I get fired? What if I start a business and it's taking so much time, I don't have as much time with my family, and my husband gets mad at me, and maybe we get divorced, like, like those worst case scenarios, like all those different kind of like what ifs that come up. And so thinking about really what is the fact and what is the fiction, and how do you determine what it is, right? Because sometimes we're really good at telling ourselves stories that we think are the truth, but maybe they're not so much. Maybe they're the truth, or excuse disguised as the truth. I love this picture, thinking about those what ifs, but you know what? Nothing bad happens when women have more money. And not only that, but studies have shown that when companies are female led, that they do better, that their production's up, their revenues are up, that women really are the change we need to see in the world. And COVID has eroded some of that, whether it's in the boardroom, whether it's in starting businesses and growing businesses, that piece has been eroded a bit. And now is the time to be intentional about that and what we can do to support each other. I love this. If you want to lift up, it says life, but it should say lift up humanity, empower women. It is the most comprehensive, pervasive, high leverage investment you can make in human beings. And that was a quote of Melissa Gates. And much of the work that she does is to empower and support women throughout the world. But I think the weight of those words, like, to let them just like sink into your soul, like, this is a game changer. This is a game changer when women are empowered, when women have money, what that looks like, the decisions that are being made with that feminine energy, and thinking about how are you going to be empowered? Thinking about, I will be ready when. And I'll ask you again at the end. But if it seems like that goal, that dream, that business, whatever you're wanting to take action on, whatever is kind of lingering there, I will be ready when blank. I'm really interested to see what is coming up for you around that one. And again, some of that is fact and some of that is, fiction, some of those things that are coming up, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But really thinking about, if you are hesitating and there's something that you want to do, like there's that dream that keeps coming back, it wouldn't be in your heart if it wasn't meant to be out in the world. And so what is it costing you to hold back? I think about it like that too. And this one is just for a little bit of a smile and a little bit of a chuckle, right? This little kid waddling with his ducklings. If I waited until I had my ducks in a row, I'd never get across the street. Sometimes you just have to gather up what you've got and make a run for it. Isn't that the truth? Seriously, like, sometimes you just gotta go. You might not necessarily feel ready. Everything might not be perfect. Like that, sometimes that's what comes up for me when that's my fill in the blank, right? But just going for it, like this little kid, and whatever ducks are following him, he's got like 100 ducks behind him. He's like, come on, let's go. We're going for it. Well, and another thing that comes up too for women is thinking about imposter syndrome and the fact that I'll be ready when, like that kind of plays into the imposter syndrome, like that we don't feel ready and that there's significant feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt. And up to 70% of the people experience it at one point or another. And so the good news is that with imposter syndrome, if you're feeling some of that, that means you're doing something big, like a really, like, was one of my clients calls it a gutsy goal. Like imposter syndrome comes up. It doesn't come up when we're hanging out in our comfort zone, when we're status quo, when we're cruising. Imposter syndrome comes up when we are doing big things, or like I've noticed, sometimes it comes up for me when like other people think I can do really big things. So that's like even more kind of pressure, right? Like that people think you can do something that you can't necessarily do. And that like maybe you're even thinking that you're going to be exposed as a fraud by doing something new, by playing big. And what does that really look like? And I think too, one of the things that we're going to focus on a little bit, just to kind of like position some of this, like where does some of that hesitation come from? Where does some of that self-doubt come from? And so I have a short video clip. It's under 3 minutes. And I was telling Kelsey before this, it's kind of provocative and it will bring stuff up for you. So I don't know if it's like a trigger warning necessarily, or just know that it's meant to be a little bit shocking. And we'll have time after the clip to debrief if you're wanting to share in the chat box, if you have a journal there, write down a few notes. We'll also have time at the Q&A at the end for any questions I might bring up, any comments that you want to make. But it's just kind of, again, thinking about if we're hesitating a little bit, like where is some of that coming from, and what are some of the obstacles that we as women that maybe are different for us than men when they're getting ready to do something new or wanting to achieve a goal or things like that. So if the technology, fingers crossed, right? Okay, so here we go.
Be a lady, they said. Your skirt is too short. Your shirt is too low. Don't show so much skin. Cover up. Leave something to the imagination. Don't be a temptress. Men can't control themselves. Men have needs. Look sexy. Look hot. Don't be so provocative. You're asking for it. Wear black. Wear heels. You're too dressed up. You're too dressed down. You look like you've let yourself go. Be a lady, they said. Don't be too fat. Don't be too thin. Eat up. Slim down. Stop eating so much. Order a salad. Don't eat carbs. Skip dessert. Go on a diet. God, you look like a skeleton. Why don't you just eat? You look emaciated. You look sick. Men like women with some meat on their bones. Be a size 0. Be a double 0. Be nothing. Be less than nothing. Be a lady, they said. Remove your body hair. Bleach this, bleach that. Eradicate your scars. Cover your stretch marks. Plump your lips. Botox your wrinkles. Lift your face. Tuck your tummy. Perk up your boobs. Look natural. You're trying too hard. You look overdone. Men don't like girls who try too hard. Be a lady, they said. Wear makeup. Highlight your cheekbones. Line your lids. Fill in your brows. Lengthen your lashes. Color your lips. Powder, blush, bronze, highlight. Your hair is too short. Dye your hair, not blue. That looks unnatural. Look young. Old is ugly. Men don't like ugly. Be a lady, they said. Save yourself. Be pure. Don't be a fool. Don't sleep around. Men don't like sluts. Don't be a prude. Don't be so uptight. But smile more. Pleasure men. Be experienced. Be sexual. Be innocent. Be dirty. Be the cool girl. Don't be like the other girls. Be a lady, they said. Don't talk too loud. Don't talk too much. Don't be intimidating. Why are you so miserable? Don't be a bitch. Don't be so bossy. Don't be so emotional. Don't cry. Don't yell. Don't swear. Endure the pain. Don't complain. Fold his clothes. Cook his dinner. Keep him happy. That's a woman's job. You'll make a good wife someday. Take his last name. You hyphenated your name. Crazy feminist. Give him children. You don't want children? You will someday. You'll change your mind. Be a lady, they said. Don't get raped. Don't drink too much. Don't walk alone. Don't go out too late. Don't dress like that. Don't get drunk. Don't smile at strangers. Don't go out at night. Don't trust anyone. Don't say yes. Don't say no. Just be a lady, they said.
Every time I watch it, it brings something different up for me. And if there's anything that you are wanting to share, to me, the reason that it really made me to pause is to think about all the mixed messages that we as women experience, and double standards, and trying to figure out who we're supposed to be in this world and what that really looks like. And so there's that piece of it that is, we doubt ourselves, right? Because like there's so much of that message in our culture of what we're supposed to be, what we're not supposed to be. Don't be intimidating, don't be bossy, be likable. And what that really looks like for us, especially, you know, as women, and the culture, the way that a lot of things are set up, even thinking about, you know, to me, one of the things that's come up is that almost what, you know, to work at some points, you know, a lot of people felt like women's place was in the kitchen. And then it was like, okay, well, if you're going to work, you only should work part-time and get paid less and no benefits. Well, and then if you need to work to be full-time, but we're still not going to pay you as much as men. And then to start your own business. So like, to me, that's almost like the ultimate act of rebellion, is to say that you have created a system that doesn't support me. And so now I am choosing to go out and start a business that is giving me more flexibility so that I can be able to have the time for the things that are most important for me, whether or not I have a husband, whether or not I have kids, but to say, and no glass ceiling, right? To be able to have, when you start your own business, to be able to have that unlimited earning potential, and to really be able to shift some of the inequalities that we see in pay and benefits and other things like that. And I saw this, this quote was one that really stuck with me as well. And this was someone I know who was wanting to start a business, and she was really brutally honest because she needed help and support, but her self-doubt was really killing her. And what that looks like to feel like other people that are around you that are so talented and creative, and feeling like you're constantly comparing yourself and you're competing with them, and to know that you are what's often holding you back. And I think some of that even kind of goes, that self-doubt, into kind of how our culture does raise women, and that drive for resources, right? Like there's so few women at the top. If you think about what corporate America looks like, I think there's maybe like 5% in executive leadership roles or something like that. I don't have the statistic right in front of me, but thinking about what that really looks like, that we have been raised to have some of that, competitiveness, or to like think, how could I ever be that good as someone else? Like she's doing awesome. And not to say like, oh, she's doing awesome, that means that works in her industry, her service or product. Like she's onto something, and I can offer something that's a compliment. Like I'm me, she's her. I'm my competitive advantage. I'm what's the differentiation in my business. And so to be able to take some of those pieces and to be able to take action to build up your confidence, because that is part of being an entrepreneur as well, or starting a business or being a freelancer. I use some of those interchangeably, even though I know they're not necessarily, but what that looks like, the biggest thing is being risk adverse, being comfortable with the unknown. And so how does that play with like self-doubt, right? Like you have to continue to challenge yourself and build yourself up and build that self-confidence and be your own cheerleader, or have like that community around you that's going to support you. I really thought this story was interesting. I don't know if anyone has tried hint water before, and to be honest, I haven't yet. But I really thought that the story around the CEO of Hint Water was super interesting. It was a woman by the name of, her name is, hold on, I have it right here in my little cheat sheet. Okay, here we go. I didn't want to say her last name wrong. It's Kara Golden. And so she's the CEO of Hint Water, and she started it back in 2004. And the reason that she did was because she was in the corporate grind. She was working long hours. She was stressed. Her skin was freaking out. She was drinking, totally true story, 10 Diet Cokes a day. Can you imagine like the caffeine, right? And wanting like something sweet, but like an alternative, knowing like she wanted to have a healthier lifestyle. And so she started creating these waters where she would boil fruit skins, like your apples, your orange, not your apples, your oranges, your lemons, like get them out, boil the water, get some of the lemon oils out, the orange oils, and put those into the flavored waters. And the thing is that she was not someone who grew up in the beverage industry. She was not someone who had ever really done food service. So she had started getting some progress, but 6 months in, she was in the Bay Area, back in 2004 when things were like booming. And so she was doing good. And she was like, I think I'm in over my head. Like, I don't know anything about this industry. I don't have a lot of context past San Francisco. What am I going to do? Well, she just happened to have a contact high up at Coca-Cola. One of the executives was actually a mentor figure to her. And so she decided, you know what? I got this at a good place. I'm going to sell it to them at a nice price, and everyone's going to go home at the end of the day and be happy. So she asked for a meeting with this gentleman and starts kind of telling him about this and what an opportunity it is. And he interrupts her and he goes, "Sweetie, Americans love their sweet." And she just paused. Like she was completely speechless, because for her, this was like a slam dunk, like end of day, going home, done with this company. And she realized in that conversation, one, the fact that she got called sweetie, she's like, not having any of this. She used that as a fuel for her fire. And she, in that conversation, the way that he responded to her, interrupting her like that, she realized in 2004, Coca-Cola and all the brands that are under that umbrella, because there's a lot, right? They had no interest in alternative, healthier beverage choices. And so she was like, you know what? I have no real competition. If this is how the soda companies, like if Coke's telling me that, I'm sure Pepsi's thinking the same. And she went for it. She used that comment. She used that meeting to fuel her fire. And the company is still going. It's like a $200 million company. But she went into that meeting thinking she was giving her company away. Like she was ready to be done. And ready or not, she got the challenge to up her game, and she did it. She didn't need Coke. She didn't need that old stoggy calling her sweetie. She proved everyone that Americans were looking, some of them were looking for a healthier lifestyle and a healthier beverage. And so I love stories like that, because we find our inspiration and our motivation in so many different places. And sometimes when we think, I can't do this, I can't, take this hint water company, I can't be expanding it. Oh, yes, she did. She just needed that inspiration, that motivation to take it to the next level and to really make it a very super successful company. Because when we doubt ourselves, what we need to do is do. Because, and that was like such a wonderful example of that, to be able to say, like, if I'm doubting myself, if my confidence is low, in doing that, I am taking action. I'm getting feedback, right? No matter what happens, I'm getting feedback to help me process my next step. And whether that's a win or whether that seems like a failure, it's a lesson learned. And taking action is how we are building our confidence. Taking action is how we doubt ourselves less. So Nike was onto something when they said, just do it. And I know sometimes that can be lip service, right? Like, there are a lot of things that are easy to do and other things that are harder to do. And especially if there's something that you've been wanting to do where it's maybe been, on your bucket list, or every year when you're writing your goals, you're thinking, oh, this will be the year I do this. But I think that fear really is the reality for everyone. Deals with fear in one way or another. Everyone deals with fear. And so that cartoon that the awkward Yeti with the head and the heart, that was one of like the biggest ahas for me, was the fact that our brains have evolved to keep us safe. And they haven't necessarily kept up with the things that are the ways that we need to and want to evolve, because they are just focused solely on keeping us safe, which is also interesting, because while we're hardwired to be safe, to stay in our comfort zone, what's known, and we are also, like, one of our needs, like our deep desires as humans, is learning and growing and finding meaning in our days, and finding that awe. Like, that's where we get that energy, right? And so that's almost kind of a conflicting needs that we have. And so I always think about it, if I'm wanting to start something new and not taking action, I have this little scale I set up, but it's just 2 little emojis, but it's kind of for the visual of it. But thinking about, if 1 is like freaking out, scared, there's no way I'm ever doing that. And 10 is like happy dance, like, woohoo, I just got that done. It was so awesome. Let me do it again. Like, I'm so excited. But thinking about, with any intention, with any goal, the thing is that when we're more on the fear side than we are on the excited side, chances are, and I've worked with like thousands of clients over the 12 years I've been coaching, and I've seen this time and again, but chances are, if you're more scared than excited, you're probably not going to do something. Because the fear really starts telling, that's the brain saying, that's just not safe. That's not safe. And so it's going to do everything, whether that's subconscious, whether that's your saboteurs. But if you're more scared than excited, your brain is going to try to hold you back, to not get you to do it. And even like to just justify, like, oh, I didn't really want to do that. That was someone else's idea. Like, the excuses will come, and some of them will seem like totally legit. So thinking about, and sometimes it's like when we are really scared like that. So like, it triggers our fight, flight, or freeze. And so we have those responses, and that's not good. You don't want to have those responses to, setting a goal. Like maybe you want to run a half marathon and you haven't really run. So, you need to train. And every morning when your alarm goes off to train to run, 4 miles, maybe it's cold and rainy, like how it's weather took kind of the drastic turn, you hit snooze. But that's kind of like your brain saying, like, that's not safe. We don't want to do it. So we're going to just say, oh, we'll train tomorrow. We'll train tomorrow. Well, if every morning you're hitting snooze and saying, I'm going to train tomorrow, how prepared are you June 15th when your race comes? Not. And you'll probably be so unprepared, you probably won't even go to it. And so your brain's like, okay, we're safe. We didn't have to run when I know we can't run. Instead of saying, like, every day I'm going to try something new, it'll be safe. And training gets me there, right? Learning, growing in the process, right? The journey in the process of our goals. And so these are just some of the typical things that come up, and maybe you've had different things as well, but some of the thoughts that might pop up, the way that we might sabotage ourselves, the voice of our fear, where it's not really based in reality all that much. Like thinking about, starting a business. Oh my gosh, it's going to be so hard. What are you thinking? Well, you can do hard things. And how hard is it when it's something that you love, when it's something that you are energizing? And someone asked me that they were going to give notice and they were really scared. And they asked me like how, when I gave notice, and I'm like, I have not looked back. Like it was the best decision I've ever made in my life. And I've never felt more energized or being aligned with my purpose and calling. And so, yeah, it can be hard if you think about it that way, but I just think about it instead of it being like hard and a lot of work, like I'm very devoted to my business. I know my why, I know my mission, I am making an impact. And so anytime that it's hard and I might cry, I might have a temper tantrum, I might eat a handful of bonbons, but tomorrow I'm showing back up because I love this and this is what I want to be doing and this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So the voice of fear that's telling you it might be hard, and what does that really look like, right? Same with it'll take too long, right? Like the overnight success. There is no such thing as an overnight success. And it might take days, weeks, months, years to make a first sale, to hire that first employee, to double your business. And the time will pass either way. So would you rather be doing something you love, something you're building in the world, creating your legacy, or would you rather do what you're doing? Like for me, it was one of those things where I felt like I was floating down the stream. It was almost like I was living someone else's life. So even though I was in my comfort zone, I was not very comfortable. And so that's kind of what comes up too, is that if you're not doing what you're put here to do, that's not necessarily if the time, just passing time, like how is that sustainable for you? I think about it that way too. Like, yeah, today might be it, like we were talking about earlier, or maybe you live to a 90, maybe you live to 110. Like medical advancements are just like crazy right now, right? So thinking about the long game and what that looks like if you aren't saying yes to your purpose and to the things that light you up, that bring you joy, that bring you meaning in the world. I had to have this little like graphic of Superwoman. She was powerful, not because she wasn't scared, because she went on despite her fear. And that is a Harper Lee quote. And I love it because it's just a reminder, everybody has fear. It's just how we deal with it. And our fear is just trying to keep us safe. So I don't really think of it as the kind of like, not evil, but just kind of like some people more think of it as like more, they don't necessarily see that, yes, there are some negatives to it. And yes, there are some positives that it is good to like, say like, maybe I should think twice before I, bungee jump off a 10,000 foot bridge, right? But some of that is evolution, and some of that is just knowing, is this something that I have some fear, and how do I work past it, right? Because like with that scale of being excited or being super scared, I just did that backwards. But thinking about, if you're a 4 on the scared, how do you get to be a 6 on the excited, right? Move up 2 slots. And so maybe that's just even breaking down your goal or finding a collaborator. But how do you keep moving up so that whatever you're wanting to do, that you can take action and that you're finding more excitement in that? And sometimes it's just even telling our brain, we're safe. This is exciting, because it's kind of the same energy that comes up in our body if we're really scared or we're really excited. It's just how our thoughts and how we're thinking about it and how we're processing those emotions that are coming up, that energy that's coming up for us. And when we think about fear, that's not the F word I was thinking about right now. But what's like one of the biggest fears? If you think about starting a new business, or maybe in the short term, you want to ask for a promotion or a raise. And for a lot of people, what causes them a bit of pause is the F word, failure. What if I start a business and it fails? What if I ask for a raise and I get a big fat no? We have no money for you. Ouch, right? Like, we put ourselves out there. That's like very vulnerable. And failure is not fatal. Failure is feedback. Failure is a lesson learned. And I see this all the time. I have, it's like I was mentioning, just where everyone is in their business, that does look different. And I had one person that I knew that had been in business for several years and had kind of been working through who her ideal clients were, who she was going to serve, the services she was bringing to the market, and what that looked like. And there is a lot of experimenting. And when you start changing around some of that, it does take time to kind of build back up so that you're getting known for the things that you're wanting to the ways that you're wanting to serve your clients. And so I think about her all the time, because she got to the point where she knew she had to hit pause on the business, continued to do a few things on the side, ended up getting a job, and is in the building phase of a new business now. And so some people could look at that and say, oh, she started a business and she failed and had to get a job, and feel bad about that. And to me, that is like the most inspiring thing ever. Like the resilience, the tenacity, the being super focused on the long game to say, this is what my business needs for me right now. Whatever the dynamic is, I just need to put this on pause. I need to get some income, right? Because that's the most important thing, how you're going to pay your rent, how you're going to feed yourself. And this isn't me giving up. This is me taking all the lessons that I've learned over the last couple years, tweaking things, and being able to relaunch and bring a new energy, right? Like sometimes if it gets hard, don't stop, just rest. And sometimes we just need to rest and pull back. But whatever that might look like, whatever that might seem like as fear, whatever that might seem like as failure, really thinking about what is the worst case scenario. And one of the strategies to actually minimize the fear of the worst case scenario is really to play out that scenario like as much as you can think, like worst case scenario, like end of world consequences. And so doing that, we really see that like most of what we're thinking could happen, like, oh, I start a business, it drains my entire savings account. There's so much stress on my family. My kids don't get to do their extracurriculars. My significant other is upset with me that I'm working all the time and they end up divorcing me. Like, that is not the reality for most people. Like, what would be that reality? And what would that look like if you were in that situation, to say, what is my plan forward? And knowing that we have that, like the resources, the support, all the things we talked about earlier, to make sure that you don't get to that point, to make sure that you're someone that is successful. Or if you need to have, hit pause on it and do a job, there's all different scenarios, and whatever our brain is envisioning as the worst case, the chances of that happening is no, probably. And it makes me think about that Bonnie Ware book. People regret the things they didn't do in life, not the things that they did. And so thinking about that and using those strategies to overcome any fear that you might have about what that really might look like in reality. One of the other things that I think is really important too when talking about, the sabotage, the fear that might come up, is thinking about so everyone has 10 ways that they sabotage themselves. And so sabotage and saboteurs sometimes is how our fear might show up, how we act when maybe we're really stressed out. But we've had behaviors, most of the behaviors that we've had from growing up, that at one point or another were protective behaviors, were adaptive behaviors, and most of them don't suit us well now. So this is just a screenshot of one of the results. It wasn't very typical for my results, I'm thinking, but the story I thought of to share did end up highlighting what it looks like in reality of it, to say, what does that look like when there is fear that kind of pops up in my business? If I'm, a stickler, if I'm someone who is a people pleaser, like I call it the disease to please, because when we put other people first, we're always putting ourselves last. And what does that look like in your business, right? That might mean not charging people enough, going over appointment sessions, saying yes when you really want to say no to certain clients or opportunities, or being a hyperachiever, right? That might really cause you to get sucked into a business, into your job, because your self-esteem, your confidence is tied into what you are achieving. And so thinking about what that can really look like. And then if we are really stressed, it's like pouring gasoline on the fire. And so this is me. So I just got back from 2 weeks in Hawaii. Yes, lots of rainbows and Mai Tais and rainforests. And I got this close to a 50-pound turtle, eye to eye, that said, "Lady, you better get out of my path or else." And it was super awesome. And, I bring that up because a lot of times we think, oh, if I'm my own boss, it's going to be so hard to take a vacation, right? Like that's maybe one of the stories that fear would tell us. And it's all about planning. And so I was able to go for a week on a vacation, and it kind of got off to a slow start in that our flight out of Madison got delayed so that we were going to miss our connecting flight. So we didn't even get to go until 24 hours later. So I was already a little salty at the airline. So we got there and it was wonderful. And we had been invited to stay at a friend's place. They weren't there. And they had found out we had gotten a little delay, and they're like, "Oh, just so you know, on the back end, no one's going to be there for a while." So my husband finds out and he's like, "Oh my gosh, we should just stay and work remotely." And I wasn't having it. I was like, no. And all of a sudden I was like, all these things were coming up for me with being a stickler. I had appointments that I had committed to. I had a plan of when I was going to be back and what was going to be happening. If there was a few of my clients that are in Europe, well, Hawaii is 5 hours off of Central time zone. So it was like, there was like no aligning our time zones for my European clients. So I would have to ask them to reschedule. So like all this stuff was coming up for me about why it wouldn't work. And it was my brain just trying to keep me safe. And as I'm having these thoughts, I'm like, I am saying no to a week in Hawaii. I'm saying no to a week in Hawaii. Like, what? Like, the thoughts that were coming up were not even realistic at all because I didn't take a lot for me to adjust my schedule. I got up some early mornings, but with the time change, it wasn't that big of a deal. I had a couple clients, like an East Coast client who I had to ask, would it be okay to meet a couple hours later? You know what she said? She said, I would be happy to do that because you always are accommodating me. You never ask for any schedule changes. And so, right, my fear was totally wrong. Like, oh, I'm going to like be an inconvenience. Oh, they're going to be displeased that I'm moving mine, that I'm going to like be judged. Like, oh, you get to spend an extra week working remotely and I have to be the one to adjust the appointment. But really, at the end of the day, the reality was like, I have set my business up. I can work anywhere in the world right now. Like, my talks are virtual, all my coaching is virtual. That is like the reality of it. And so that is one of the perks. That is one of the benefits. And I'm living that freedom. That's such an important value to me. And to really be able to know how my saboteurs, how my fear might look in my business, even though I work on things, is dissecting those thoughts that do come up for us and really being like, what is the reality of the situation? And it was not at all what some of the thoughts that were coming up were. And so it did work out, and there were some lessons learned as well. And that's why I think it's so important to know yourself. And the picture up here is the Achilles heel, because I think to know our Achilles heel is just as important as knowing what our competitive advantage, like what are the things that we do better than anyone else. But when you're thinking about starting or growing your business, like what does that look like? What are the challenges that you have in what are the skills that you need to enhance? What are the things that you maybe need to delegate or outsource, especially as you are growing, but knowing yourself and what that might look like in the business to be able to say, you know, these are my strengths. These are, you know, for example, like an Achilles heel could be something about, you know, maybe someone doesn't like doing the books. Like that comes up quite a bit, especially if you're more on the creative side. If you are more on the vision, some of the day-to-day and the details in the weeds, maybe doing your books isn't necessarily something that you enjoy as much. And so maybe there's that disconnect between the realities of where you are in your budget month to month versus what that should look like, especially as you are starting a business, right? And so every dollar coming in is that's very, very important. And so knowing where those trends are and what that might look like, and knowing when you need to adjust when something's working or not working. And so thinking about what your Achilles heel is, and then also what your competitive advantages are, and thinking about whether that's, you know, I've seen in some of my clients use personality assessments, whether that's talking to friends and family, like whether that's looking at performance reviews, whether that is looking at LinkedIn recommendations, but getting that objective feedback to say, what am I really good at? And what are the things that I have to be on the watch for, especially when it's, you know, you're wearing, they say like the 12 hats, like you're a team of one. A lot of people are, especially women, when they get their business started. And then actually statistics show that most women-owned businesses are typically a solopreneur situation, especially for the first few years. And then what does that look like to get that support you need, or to fill in some of those gaps, because we can't know everything, we can't do everything on our own. And when we try to, that's when we get the burnout. That's when we lose our motivation. That's when we lose sight of our why and the long game, right? Like what is keeping us in doing the things that we love to do, that we were meant to do, called to do in the world. And one of the things that has come up, and it's like the little like skeleton dance. If you can't get rid of the skeleton in your closet, you'd best teach it to dance. And so that's something I think that doesn't come up as much as far as when you read advice around starting a business, when you think about life as an entrepreneur. And I almost don't have the words to explain this. It's just kind of this idea and like this way that I think about it. When I think back on the last 12 years, like it's almost like my entrepreneurial journey and so many of the women that I work with, it kind of gets to like magnified or maybe shining the light on the things that as like an employee maybe you could get away with that, or maybe because you are dealing with the risk, you're dealing with that uncomfortable constant change, you are dealing with uncertainty to more significantly than maybe you would in other paths in life. And thinking about whether it's like the saboteurs, like where did some of that stuff come from and how is that impacting you? And thinking about, the skeletons in your closet and some of the challenges that you've had, I know for me, like, I feel like they have made me resilient and to the point that it's like, I am almost like stubborn in my resolve to be successful in my business, and there's no plan B. And for several years, there probably should have been a plan B, but I would double my efforts and I would just remind myself that it's the long game, right? And thinking about how that has shown up and some of the saboteurs, like that's kind of a way of tying that to like this idea around skeletons in the closet, but like some of the things that you maybe have had to deal with as a kid or a young adult that maybe might bring up some of those feelings of inadequacy or self-doubt or hyperachiever, like how does that tie into your business, and is that something that might be getting in your way, and then how do you work through that? And so for me, one of the things that I've done and I say this more because I don't think enough people say it, but I have always worked with a coach. Sometimes I'm working with a life coach, sometimes I'm working with a business coach, and I've also done therapy because I know I can be the one that gets in my way. I know that I can be the one that doubts myself. And so doing what I need to get the support to not take a setback as a failure, to see it as a lesson learned and know when I need to slow down, to know when I'm being too hard on myself. Like, right, when you're ambitious and you're the one that's setting the pace, sometimes you will lose your breath, you're going so fast. But thinking about, how do I want to be in my business and what does my business need from me? I just, told you about Hawaii and just getting back from Hawaii, and I've had like wicked jet lag. And so that has been hard. And that was something I thought about with extending my trip is how is that going to look for today? How is my energy going to be? And that was my saboteur again, trying to tell me that I wasn't going to be good enough. And thinking about what does my business need for me? I got invited to go first thing Monday morning to a Zumba class, and I didn't have a client until mid-morning. And it was like, no, I'm just getting back for vacation. I should really do this. And again, thinking about as those messages are coming up, what does my business need from me right now? My business needs energized Laura. My business needs sharp focused Laura. And so I get those things by taking good care of myself. So an hour Zumba class with me bebopping and jumping up and down at the community center down the block, it made a huge difference. Like I had a really great productive first day, rolling into a second day, and just thinking about what you need and what your business needs from you and aligning those two things to be your most successful.
Laura, I think you muted yourself. There you go. You're good.
Okay. We're back on.
Yep.
Okay, and you can see the slide?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Maybe that was like my cue to start wrapping it up. What did you miss?
It
Was
was
there
just
any?
when you switched over to the next slide.
Oh, thank goodness. Okay. Okay. Thank you for some reason the buttons are kind of sticky. I don't know. Maybe I got some Mai Tai on them or something. But I have to fix my computer because there have been like some sticky buttons. So thank you for your patience with that and for letting me know. But so I have a show and tell. I like to do little show and tells because that kind of keeps it fun, right? So the quote that really kind of stuck out to me as we're wrapping up, thinking about, you have to have the clarity of vision, passion, and drive. And you can kind of feel if you have it. You can feel if you have what it takes to do it. And then you still might fail. And you will fail many times. But if you keep picking yourself up and brushing yourself off despite falling, and you just have that strength and you just have the fortitude, you can probably go a long way. And so I had to put that quote in because, one, I think it's spot on. Bethany Frankel, you may recognize her name as the lady behind Skinny Girl Cocktails. She started on Housewives of New York, and she was actually featured. Oh, here's the show and tell. She was featured on this month's Entrepreneur magazine. And I love the story because it's all about ready or not, the time is now. She's like, you know what? Before I hit the Housewives of New York, she was trying a ton of stuff. She was feeling not doing well in corporate, not figuring it out. She said she only got paid $7,000 to do that Housewives, but she just had a feeling it could maybe bring something more. And while she was on the show, she launched Skinny Girl, and she's gone on to do a lot of really cool things. She's true an entrepreneur. She has an HBO Max show coming out, The Big Shot, which is kind of a hiring type show, but it's, her doing her entrepreneurial thing and how do you find, talented people that are at your level to be able to support you. And so that's coming. And she's in the process of inking a huge podcast deal. But her story, like, she's like, I had so many things that I tried that fell flat. But she's like, I just knew I wanted this entrepreneurial lifestyle. I knew I could do a bunch of different stuff. She does not even set goals for herself. It's more just like kind of as things pop organically. She's like, I never planned to do a podcast, and here I'm about to sign my life away and do this. But I think it's just such a good reminder of that anything's possible. And, what happens if you are stubborn, if you are resistant, if you're insistent on doing things that you love, like, she's quick. If this isn't something she's liking to do, she's out of there and she's on to the next thing. She's making decisions fast and taking fast action. And sometimes that's going to be successful, and other times it's not going to be. And so, but it comes back to doing what you love and really honoring that. And, oh goodness. All right. How is it not doing it for me? Okay. So I think, okay. So one other thing I wanted to share too is, and this has come up before, but just thinking about, I know some people are maybe starting to think about a business, maybe some people are starting to transition, but how do you kind of figure out how your plan, right? Like thinking about if your fear is going to come up, like what's fact and what's fiction. And I always think about this graphic I saw online one time because, sometimes there's old, outdated, advice. Like advice is only as good as the person that is giving it to you. And so thinking about starting a business, like that path looks a lot different for people. And you maybe one, like for me, it was like, okay, I've been thinking about this for a while. I'm just going to start. And then there might be that transition period of really needing to plan and saying like, okay, Like, for example, one of the clients I worked with, she was going to be starting a business, and about a month into coaching, she came into the session and she goes, okay, I've decided. And then she told me a date 4 months in the future is going to be the day that I leave my corporate and go full time in my business. And I was like, 4 months? Like, she has like been ticking along, had everything ready. And she goes, yeah, because I just found out we're getting a huge bonus. And if I don't stay until then, I lose out on my bonus. And I've been working so hard all year. And that's going to be money that's going to help supplement my income as I'm building up my clientele, as I'm building up my business. So like the fact of the situation for her, it made sense to delay a little bit to get that bonus. But everyone is in a different situation as far as like the resources they need, the time they need, what that timeline looks like. And so, people might say, don't quit your job until, and then there's like this long list of things, but it depends on really where you are and what options that you have for you and how you're feeling about life, right? Like if you are absolutely miserable, like if you just can't go in another day, if you have the Sunday scaries at the end of every weekend, like, again, tomorrow isn't promised. Like, is this how you want to go through life indefinitely? And you might just have to take a leap of faith. And maybe there is, if you're corporate or you're wherever you are, nonprofit, whatever you're doing now is like plan A and a business is plan B. Maybe there's a step in between there, right? Instead of it being A, B, maybe it's like where you are now is A, maybe B is a temporary, maybe a part-time, maybe something, in a similar industry that would be less demanding. And then C is starting the business, but having that plan and setting that timeline and moving towards that. And the big thing is like not letting fear hold you back, not letting fear get in the way of what you are wanting to accomplish. So I also like this quote, success is a choice. Oh my goodness. I think at some point in life, people choose to be successful. And up until that point in time, life happens to them. And I think that is, like, for me anyways, I felt that like really relatable, that it was like life was happening to me versus like that Melinda Gates slide where what happens if we empower women? What happens if they are making decisions? What happens if they are opening themselves up to unlimited earning potential? But to say, what is your definition of success? Like creating success on your terms and what that really looks like to say, I'm being my best self. And to me, that is success. Or every day when I can, live my mission, every day when I touch the life of another person, every day when they can say, because of you, my life changed. Because of you, my life has been made different. And like, so for me, that's what it kind of has boiled down to. So when you think about success, what comes up for you? How do you create success on your terms? And going through this a little bit quickly, but knowing that there's resources, knowing that there's support, again, that helps on a scale for scared to excited to know there are so many people, so many wonderful organizations, people support your community. And then knowing that the people you think that are going to support you and the people that do support you, that might be totally different. And that's totally normal too. And thinking about one of the things, skills to pay the bills is one of my gutsy goals. One of the ways that I really showed up in the last couple of years was creating a program to help women level up or make a comeback in their business. And so that's been something where I've challenged myself too. And that's taken a couple of years. Like sometimes I take quick action and other times because of life, because of fear, I hold myself back too. So it's just continuing to take those steps forward when you are most able to do that and most comfortable doing that. And so as we're wrapping up today, one quick story, another inspiration for you. You may have seen this woman, her name's Tiffany Pham, and she's on all the new Lexus commercials. And I've known her for years as a businesswoman I've looked up to. She's quite a bit younger than me. I think when I started following her, she was like in her late 20s. She's the CEO of Mogul. And she came to this country as a teenager. She didn't even speak the language. She ended up going to Yale and Harvard. When she graduated, she took not one, not two, 3 jobs in the entertainment industry to learn the ins and outs of media. She taught in her free time. She taught herself how to code. And now her company has helped millions of women all over the world to feel more empowered in their careers. And not only does she have these women that want to step up as leaders, that want to be more, to be the best selves, that are ambitious like us, she also then is really helping those companies that want to change, that want a different business model than what the patriarch has told them that their business is supposed to look like, to celebrate women, to support women, and not only women, but diversity and inclusion, like connecting those people. And so she is another one that she did not wait for the time to be ready. She did not wait for the time to be perfect. She did what she had. She worked hard at something she loved. And she is a wonderful role model for entrepreneurs everywhere. And I have to put in, I love her book, another show and tell. You Are a Mogul, how to do the impossible, do it yourself, and do it now. And so, well, there we go. So we have a few minutes for question and answers. And I would just say my final thought is, you starting a business, you being an entrepreneur, is betting on yourself. And what better bet is there in the world than betting on yourself?
Thank you, Laura. If anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and put it in the chat. Otherwise, you can unmute yourself as well.
Yes, absolutely. I can get this. They were like, okay, here we go. Oh, wonderful. Thank you, ladies, for being here. I'm so appreciative for you. And if there's any questions, or feel free to reach out after if you have anything you want to talk through, or if there's anything I can do to support you. I know sometimes people might have something that they'd rather talk about one-on-one than to share with a group, but, or if there's any comments too, you're more than welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. I will include your contact information in the follow-up email with today's recording. So feel free to share this with everybody and anybody who might find this beneficial. Laura did such a nice job inspiring us today, sharing her own personal stories, which is always kind of a relief, knowing that, you know, you might be going through the same thoughts and you aren't alone. So thank you, Laura. It is appreciated. We appreciate you joining us today. So I will send up a follow-up email with Laura's contact information as well.
Kelsey, should I address, someone put a comment earlier in the chat box around making a change, but unsure what that looks like?
Sure.
Okay. I would say that is something that comes up a lot. I think that was Christina. Thanks for sharing that. And to know that you're like comfortable / bored, but that, you know, wanting something else, and what does that really look like? And I think that's the part where that knowing yourself, like starting to think about, you know, what are my values? What are the things that are most important to me? And then what are, you know, like we were talking about your competitive advantage, your Achilles heel, like starting to think about what does that look like for you as far as things that you value, your strengths and weaknesses, but just kind of getting a realistic assessment of that. And then a really big piece of that is like, what does light you up? For me, some of the clues were coming in. I had mentioned some nonprofit leadership roles, and I just loved it. I was so energized. And so that really kind of was, I always think of bread comes from the universe, but that was kind of one of the things to say, like, what am I doing now that I love? Or what's something that maybe I used to do that I haven't done? And just start kind of, as you're going through, like, I always think about it like being on autopilot. And that's what we have done because our lives have been so demanding of us. But what does it look like to start being like more intentional and just kind of start from that place of really kind of starting to think, what are the things that I love to do? What are the things that I'm good at? And then what does that look like as far as a change? If that's look like creating a business, if that's looking like going to a different industry or something like that, but starting to think about what does that really look like to be able to have that intersection of what you're good at and what you like to do. And that's where you're going to find where, going from comfortable / bored to energized, to being in a flow, and to really being, fully showing up. Oh, good. I'm glad. She says, awesome, very helpful.
Great. Any other questions? I don't think so. All right. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thanks, Kelsey. We appreciate it.
Have a good day. Thanks,
You too.
everyone.
Thanks, ladies.